My brother and I have a story that happened during the day, and we're both positive what we saw was a Skinwalker. Here's what happened. We were staying in Wenatchee in Washington State. It's kind of eastern, but not really. Like, it wants to be eastern, but it's not. Anyhow, we were staying with my friend's family whilst my parents were out of state. My friend's mom, I'll call her Tammy, says to me, "We would get your brother. Dinner's ready." To which I replied, "Where is he?" My friend, I'll call her Emily, goes, "I think he's by the river." So I said, okay, and went to go get him. I crossed the backyard, which is really a field, and prepared myself to go down a stupidly steep hill. The only way to get down the hill was to keep your foot planted on some rocks. It's either that or you fly down. I got down the hill and say my brother just chilling on a swing thing. You know, the swings with 2 or 3 seats on them? Those things. I stood behind for a minute, planning to push the swing a little and scare him. But I heard my name being called. So, naturally, I turned around, thinking it was Emily calling me or something. No one on the field. I had and still have a pretty active imagination, so I just brushed it off. I turned back to the swing, and my brother was standing up now. His eyes were fixed across the river, so I looked over too. We saw a deer-looking thing standing on its back legs, and I again was just like, oh, it's my imagination again. I looked away for a few seconds, then turned back. My brother was now shaking. He still hadn't even noticed me. The deer guy was still there, but its mouth was moving. It was saying my name. I just could barely make it out, but it was saying my name. It started to shake as well. My brother turned around, ready to run back to the house, and yelled when he saw me. This was the following conversation between us. "What happened? Did you see it too? The deer?" "It wasn't a deer. I don't know what that thing was, but it was not a deer." "Was it calling my name to you?" "No, it was calling my name." "We can talk about it later, but I was sent to go get you 5 minutes ago. Dinner's ready." And I know I said I have a very active imagination, but the part that scares me is that my brother does not, and he saw exactly what I saw. And so we went inside and ate dinner, and said nothing of it. We had both relaxed for the most part by this time we got back to the house, and we texted each other about it after, so nobody would know but us. About a year after the happening, my brother came into my room and said, "Hey, remember that deer thing we saw in Wenatchee a few years ago?" I told him I thought about it frequently, and what he said actually scared me so bad I thought I was going to go into cardiac arrest. He goes, "Well, I've done some major research, and we could have died if we went near it. Turns out it was a Skinwalker." And he continued to tell me about Skinwalkers and what they do. I'm not getting into it, but every now and again, we both share a look when someone starts talking about stuff like Wendigos and Skinwalkers, urban legends and creepypasta, stuff like that, and neither of us had said anything about it. But my brother decided to tell my dad, who grew up with urban legends and stuff like that, and he also thinks it's a Skinwalker. I can still see that evil thing's face every time I hear about Wendigo and Skinwalker encounters. My brother got a kind of mental effect from this thing. Defect, effect, I don't even know what to call it. I don't want to say it's like PTSD, but certain things around the topic will trigger him. He'll constantly have nightmares about it, and he doesn't like talking about it, unless he initiates the conversation. I'm a little more thick-skinned around the topic of scary things, but it scared me into thinking I was going to die on the spot. We haven't been back to Wenatchee. I just seen a question on here asking about a positive encounter, and I have one I would like to share. Though may not be what I thought. About 20 years ago, After I graduated high school, I used to run traps to make extra money in the wintertime. Since I was pregnant with my daughter, any sort of extra income was necessary, since trapping is frowned upon, oddly. Anyway, my father had always told me about the creek I trapped in as being quite strange. We would always walk the creek to collect arrowheads and look for other Shawnee relics. So he would tell me stories about the Shawnee Native American tribe and their history and folklore. It was a very special spot to us, so when I began trapping, my father would tell me to have respect for the wildlife. Don't litter, kill humanely, and don't kill what doesn't need to be killed. So I built a great deal of appreciation to life, which led to my career in conservation. The only reason I state these things is to build context as to why I did what I did. About once a week, while walking up the creek, I would hear whistling, like a human but in random patterns, and that would be along with the smell of sulfuric and rotten eggs, which my dad told me was most likely a Bigfoot or a skunk ape, and sightings had occurred as long as he could remember in our area. Then, one time I was scanning down the tree line with my binoculars to check to see if I had any coyotes and foxes in my traps to save me the walking time. I seen a fairly medium-sized tree swing dramatically a little past the tree line. So I headed over there with my .22, hoping to sneak up on a bobcat or any animal that was medium-sized my .22 could kill with a headshot. About 3/4 of the way to the tree line, the swaying had stopped, and I didn't see anything, but at least two of whatever it was began whistling and whooping further back in the forest. I continued to head up the creek, and it always stayed somewhat behind me at a distance, but never left. That was pretty interesting. Then, one day, sadly an oil fracking company purchased most of the land. They still gave me permission to trap, but they had a few accidents where the water got so damn nasty, it killed just about everything. It broke my heart to see beavers, muskrats, and some coons floating down the creek every time I went. But after they had installed their rigs and cleared some forest things, got a little hostile. One day, running traps, almost all my traps had been ruined, bent, beaten, and broken. And the remained animals I had caught were either stolen, ripped from the trap with their foot or leg still attached, and I even found a coyote that had been messed up bad. Fur torn, broken lower jaw, head beaten in. I felt like this was in retaliation to what the oil company had done, and I was being blamed. But it is positive. For a few months afterwards, I would go to the store twice a week and buy a variety of apples, pears, and a mixture of meat from carcasses I had skinned, put it in a basket, and leave it in the forest, hoping whatever it was would get it before anything else. Sometimes the basket would disappear, but always in 2 days, everything was gone. One day, I believe it left me a present in return. Next to where I dropped off the basket, there was about 100 plus small sticks stacked very neatly, about 20 acorns, and a deer antler. It made me feel happy. I do hope that I did help this creature out in its very sad moments of life, though it may have been everything but a Bigfoot or skunk ape, because I never physically seen it or any tracks in the creek bed. But all of my occurrences happened in the woods along the creek, so I really don't know. So still to this day, 20 years later, I think of it time to time, and I don't see a reason why people should be afraid of them. It was a sad but positive 2 winter seasons with it, even if it was an animal I didn't recognize. I hope I helped. This happened when I was really young. I was around 6 to 9 years old. A little backstory. I had a significant trauma happen to me when I was 6. I don't want to go into details, but it made life difficult for a while. I totally shut down for a bit, and sleep at the time was my only safe haven. For the next couple of years after my incident, my dreams got stranger and stranger. I at first only saw them in the background of my dreams, like part of the scenery almost. Then, I began to lucid dream. All of a sudden, these dark shadow people with red eyes began to manifest in my room. I never felt danger from them, and that gave me a sense of relief. I would talk to them like they were someone I knew, and I would tell them about my day. A lot of times, these conversations would end because they would hear something and move off my bed. I would wake from my semi-asleep state by trying to go after them. Towards the end of my encounters with these creatures, I got a sense of terror, and I could never pinpoint it until one night, a white figure came through my door and reached out with a knife toward me. I woke up with a jolt and never saw any of them again, though I will sometimes see one of them dart out of my vision. Some context. This happened like 10 years ago, on a hill southwest from Colombia. I'm skeptical about a lot of things, but this, I'm absolutely sure what I saw there was real. I was camping with my Boy Scout troop in a not-so-friendly place. Very, very hot. Really rough terrain. Awfully humid. Our troop was more likely military service than scout life. It was kind of far away from the main road, and the main base was in a tree-covered hill. I think that could be worth noted that it is less than 5 kilometers from an indigenous sacred site known as the Sacred Territory of the Creator, and probably it is a sacred site to, I don't know, since the tribes that inhabited the area were forced by the Spanish to abandon their belief, traditions, and language, so there's a lot of things we don't know about them, even I being a descendant of them. It was 3 p.m., and we sent 3 people to do the dishes after lunch. There was a small lagoon 5 to 10 minutes downhill. It shouldn't take more than a half an hour for them to be back. An hour passes. They haven't came back. Knowing them, surely they're just having a trivial and boring gossip conversation. But as a patrol leader, I have to call them back. They didn't respond to whistles, so I personally went downhill to find them. The way to the lagoon is mostly a 2.5-foot path between a steep hill and a dry river with dense vegetation and closed curves. I was walking carelessly until I noticed something behind a curve. At first, I thought it was a really massive vulture, but I felt uneasy, so I started going back in silence until I stepped over a dry branch. After the crackling, the thing extended its wings, showing a very muscular humanoid back, and then a head that watched me. Then, it took off with a sound more like a helicopter than a bird. Nonsense, I thought. There must be a rational explanation. Maybe it was just my imagination. I arrived to the lagoon and effectively, they were having the most boring and dumb of conversations. I told them to pack everything and started going back to the campsite. When all of the troop came out of the tree-covered area, the lagoon is in a clear, and told me that I was taking too long. My encounter with the Birdman shouldn't have taken me more than 5 seconds, or so I thought. Anyway, there was a very cocky boy in the troop that said, "I'll go front," and entered alone in the woods. 5 seconds later, I heard the same helicopter-like sound, and the boy came running from the woods, hyperventilating. "Scouter, I saw a man with wings." Of course, everybody laughed, but I didn't say a word. Hi. I've got kind of a strange thing that's bugged me for going on probably 10 years now. So, growing up, I always felt like my parents' house was haunted. I always experienced weird things, seen shadows, and just felt uneasy. I also experienced sleep paralysis very frequently. I didn't know what it was back then, and I thought I was being specifically targeted. At night, it was like a black cloud hovering around the ceiling of the bedrooms, and I kind of remember seeing eyes. I also always got a very uncomfortable feeling going down into the basement and coming back up. Like the black cloud from the nighttime was chasing me up the stairs or something. Anyway, these were quote-unquote normal experiences for me growing up, as they were so frequent. However, there was this one time that really freaked me out, and I cannot for the life of me find any kind of information on it. So, what happened was, I was about 16 years old enough to drive anyways. My parents were out in town for the night, and I'd met them for a bit on my way home from work, and then proceeded to go home myself. It was wintertime, and to save heat, we had blocked off the second story of our house. I had to get something that was in my upstairs bedroom, so I opened the partition we had blocking off the stairs. When I opened the partition, there was this thing sitting on the stairs. The best way I can describe it was kind of like a gargoyle. It was hunched over and just sitting there on the stairs, eye level. It was big, adult-sized, but scrawny, dark, had wings. I can't recall if it made a noise. I freaked out and ran and locked myself in another room while I called my parents. I was in full panic mode. I had never seen it before or since. It still bugs me to this day. I remember it so vividly. And being that it was about 10 years ago, my younger sister has since described something similar. I had never told her the story before. I have searched and searched, and the only things I can find are things about the Mothman or about gargoyles outside. Anyway, I thought I'd share because it still bugs me. I'm wondering if anyone else has experienced something similar. My parents don't believe in me or are just in denial of whatever is going on there, but I know what I saw. Well, after my Nymphs fairy story, a lot of people have asked me to give more, so there's a lot of you who won't believe me, but my village is a freaking supernatural place with weird things happening over the years, and there was even a UFO crash. You can all search it on Google. My village is Atalanti, Atalanti, named after the Greek Amazon, and it was all over the news back in 1990 when the weird object landed. But let's get started. My first story. While my great-grandfather, from my grandfather's side, was young, he was working for someone who had sheep, and one night, one of the sheeps went nuts. So during the night while they were asleep, they heard some noises, and they woke up to find the sheep having a saddle on and walking. They tried to stop it, but it was like it didn't listen. None of the sheeps ever did this before. So when the sheep turned around, it didn't really look like a sheep anymore, but something else. Like the voice was deeper, and it was like it had walked on two legs. The face was like distorted, and it was definitely not white anymore. My great-grandfather was so scared after he run and never worked with this guy again. Story number 2. There are a lot of rumors about people using dark magic and evil things, and a guy my grandfather knew didn't believe these things were real. He kept walking around telling this to the locals at the cafes, and a weird old dude had heard him, and he was like, "You'll see tonight." So he sent a weird freaking donkey to him that kept kicking him at night until he begged to stop and said he believed in demonic entities. Story number 3. Now this is a neighbor of my grandfather while they were in their 20s. He was a man who went to church very often, always praying, always believing in God, and it was like the devil tricked him every day. There was a boy who kept calling him at nights at the stairwell of his house. He asked him to go outside and play, and after a while, when he didn't join him, the boy turned into a black dog. That happened for a long time until they called a priest, and it stopped. Story number 4. This happened to one of my uncles. He came back from work late at night. They were working as farmers with clover. Anyway, there used to be a small and narrow street that led to the house faster, but no one went there during late night. It was a crossroad, and there was a small faucet there too, but everyone avoided it after midnight. Well, my uncle decided to head faster home, rather than to stay safe, and something invisible attacked him. It grabbed him by the neck and pushed him down. He immediately started saying a prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and the thing left. possibly a demon. A priest had later told him to never use that street. And guess what? The street doesn't exist anymore. There's a deserted house there now, and I don't want to know what's hiding in there. Story number 5. My aunt used to hear every night a weird banging outside of their window when they moved in their new home, like someone was chopping wood. They often went out to see if there was someone, but no one was there. And apparently they learned that they have killed soldiers at the place during World War II. Crazy. Story number 3. The alien UFO crash. So, during 1990 in the summer, there were a lot of UFO sightings all around Greece, and one actually crashed at a hill next to my village. Story number 7. My cousin said at their clover field once that something had landed again, because there was a circle and it was like burned, and for literally about 2 years nothing grew on that place again. Story number 8. When we went with my grandfather to buy cheese from a guy he knows, we walked into his farm. I looked around the walls and it was full of lashes, like the whips that hit the horses with, but some of them were a bit too much. They seemed super heavy, and I asked my grandfather, "What's that?" I was like 9 to 10, but I have never seen that type of lash before. It didn't look normal. Anyway, my grandfather told me to shush, and he said we'll talk home. So, when we went home, he told me that man calls demons and hits them. He asked them who they hurt, and then hits them so hard with those whips. So, I was like, oh, he's nice then. And my grandfather said immediately, he hasn't been in church for many, many years, because what he's doing is against God. Even though he hits them, he still uses dark magic to call them in. Well guys, these are just my stories, and I have a lot more, about ghosts and saints appearing at churches, and so many kids I know have their own stories from their grandparents. I swear, my village, and especially central Greece, there's something there. Some people even claim to have seen satyrs at the ancient place of Delphi, that they're weird electromagnetic powers, and don't get me started about Mount Olympus. Anyway, hope you enjoy these. Hi everyone, I would like to share this story. I've heard about 2 men who supposedly lived in the Devalles Cave in Penteli, Athens, Greece. Some people from the area have said they've encountered them close to the forest and the cave. Well, I need to tell you that there's a lot of theories about this cave, about other dimensions, and the fact that you can actually travel somewhere else through here. Even UFO sightings, people losing their memory. There's the phenomenon of negative gravity, which is amazing. There's so much electromagnetic activity. So people who claim seeing them said the men always walk with their hands behind their back, and whoever saw them thought they didn't have hands. But if you took a look from the back, you could see their hands were bird-like, like claws. They never spoke, almost like they couldn't, and they were very tall and pale. Now, could this really be just a spooky story? But if it's not, what do you think they could be? Could they really be from a different dimension? Or they're entities? Or just people who were born like this? There's also sightings of angels and ghosts on the area, so maybe it's all illusions from the huge electromagnetic energy field. Also, another fact about the cave is that the compasses go crazy there, and during 1977, they said the army actually did some experiments there, and after the 1990s Satanists actually went there for, you know, their satanic rituals. I was on the Little Miami bike trail heading back to Murrow from Oregonia, mile marker 23.5. It was Sunday, April 12th, around 5 in the afternoon. Since the COVID restrictions were enacted a week or 2 prior, the trail had become so crowded every day of the week. However, a cold front came in, and it was cool, cloudy day, and very few people on the trail. Maybe 15 to 20 riders encountered from Oregonia to Kings Mill. Well, maybe more, but not bad. I'm retired and ride this route nearly daily, weather permitting. So, after passing under the former Jeremiah Morrow Bridge, I-71, over Little Miami River, there's a long, gentle arc in the trail. I haven't seen a soul since I turned around at Wilmington Road. I'm cruising. It's nice and quiet, when suddenly I heard a loud knock. So distinct that I instantly said in my head, that was a knock. It came from atop the hill to the east. I pondered all of the conditions, kids playing, not, cold, remote, and they don't play in woods anymore. Adults messing around, maybe? But how would they know I was there? Natural, very doubtful. I'm nearly 68 and never heard anything so crisp, clearly, like a Louisville slugger full speed against a barkless, solid ash tree, or so I imagined. There, that's what happened. I look online to see if any Bigfoot sightings had been reported in this area, and found none. I stored the incident away until last weekend when I was talking to my son. He's 46 in May, and I raised him near Murrow, abutting the former Frisch Farms in the 3C Highway. Our school district includes the Mainville area, and one of his good friends lived on a hillside, at a 90-degree curve on Sickby Road. His friend, Chris Flick's older brother, told Nick, 20 years ago, he and his dad both saw a Bigfoot walking through the woods on the opposing hillside 2 different times. Nick said he never related this until he told me, because of my knock story, of course. He said he'll never forget it, and because of his story, I tell you my story. I was driving down Willard Road around 5 p.m. as I came around the last right-hand corner, looking toward the straightaway to the junction with Cook Underwood Road. I saw a black object in the road. I thought it was a bear, and the largest bear I have ever seen. It took up the whole left lane of the road, and it was huge. It looked like the butt was raised up. I figured it could be a 600-pound bear in my mind. Then I saw this commotion going on, like something moving up and down, all black. A bear will run or lumber across the road. At the time, I thought I have never seen a bear do this. I thought this could be several deer or elk walking in the road. I was confused about all the motion going on. Then, as it approached, the creature approached the edge of the bank. It popped up. I yelled out, "It's a man!" What is a man doing out here in the woods this time of night? It stepped onto the bank and walked into the woods. As my mind was trying to figure out what I saw the whole body and the head. The right leg stepped onto the bank, left arm back, no hat, no coat, no clothes. There was no snout or ears like a bear. Yes, a cone-like head, tall, arms longer, legs bulky. My headlights lit it up. By the time I passed it, it had disappeared into the woods, and by the time I reached Cook Underwood Road, about 600 feet, I knew what I saw, but was still just trying to process it. I went back on Sunday to see if I could see prints, but it had rained hard all night, and I saw no prints. I still see the creature in my mind. Later, as my mind was processing what I saw, I knew it had to be arms and legs going up and down as it crossed the road, and also it was actually crawling, then stood up by the bank, but it was so fast like it popped up. Still hard for me to believe what I saw, but I believe it was a Sasquatch. I also now believe as I approached it when my headlights came upon it, it turned back towards the headlights and scrunched its face because the headlights were in its eyes, then turned and faced into the woods and walked off.